Before you step into the new year, you need three things: a moment to pause and reflect on the journey, the courage to release what no longer serves you, and the imagination to reimagine what's possible.
Welcome to Success Spectrum Podcast, where new entrepreneurs break free from limiting beliefs, build unshakable financial confidence, and step boldly into the life and business they were meant to create.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Success Spectrum Podcast, sponsored by Apex Affiliation. I'm your host, Kadeem McLean. In this one, we're wrapping up the new year by giving you three powerful steps. One of them is to kind of go over what you've learned, right? Reflecting on what you've learned. The second one is to release what's been holding you back. And the third one is to reimagine what the future holds, right? What does next year hold? What does next year look like with clarity and courage? In order to do that, I feel like it's important to kind of take a step back and tell you this. I was speaking with a brother of mine, really, shout out to you, Mike. In that conversation, he talked about measuring, and he was saying how he started to measure things recently and how much of a difference it's making for him in his business and in his life. And it brought back a lot of thoughts, let's say, for me, and I ended up sending him a message, but some of the things I said in that message were about measurement, of course. I remember times in my life where I didn't necessarily measure. And because I wasn't measuring, I ended up in $20,000 plus of debt. I was getting phone calls from creditors seeking me to, trying to get me on the phone to tell me I need to pay the money, right? I wasn't measuring. I didn't necessarily know what was happening or what was going on. There's times where we don't measure things. And when we don't measure things as an entrepreneur, if you're not taking measurements, if you don't know your numbers on paper or in your mind, however you want to have it, how do you know if your business is working? How do you know if you're actually doing something good, if you're helping who you set out to help, if your product or service is solving the problem that you're aiming to solve? We don't know until we look at the numbers and we measure everything, because without measurement, there is no growth. You don't know if you're hitting your revenue numbers. You don't know if you're hitting your profit numbers. You don't know if you're in a deficit if you're not measuring and tracking and seeing what's going on, right? So all of that being said, this is a moment for us to pause again and reflect on the journey where we've come so far. What are some wins that you had in 2025? Maybe you launched a business. Maybe you figured out the business plan that you're going to be launching. Maybe you mended a relationship. Maybe you got out of a relationship that was a problem. Maybe you made a move somewhere, right? You started a new habit that you started to see some growth from, something you've been wanting to do, a habit you've been wanting to start for years, for months. Maybe it wasn't a win necessarily, but I still consider this a win. But acknowledge maybe you got out of a struggle, right? A struggling situation, something that wasn't necessarily the best position for you to be in. That's a win. And along that same thread, let's acknowledge some of the real struggles we've gone through, right? Because you made it out. You're here today. So what are some struggles that you had in 2025 that you've overcome? Acknowledge some of those struggles, because again, when we don't look at the numbers, we don't know what's going on. We don't necessarily pat ourselves on the back like we're supposed to, because I can often be my own worst critic. But for any of you out there that are like me in that sense, I always have to remind myself and encourage you to also be your biggest advocate. When we look at our wins, when we acknowledge the struggles, we can then step towards being our biggest advocates as well, not just our biggest critics, because we know what we've gone through. We acknowledge and reflect on some of the things we've overcome. Again, we maybe had some serious challenges last year. I don't want to name a bunch of them, but you've gone through some things. So acknowledge that. And then, of course, recognize the patterns. There were patterns that I was doing that put me into that $20,000 plus of debt years and years ago. There's patterns that you might be doing right now that maybe it's not a financial situation, but there's patterns that lead you to continuously arguing with your spouse or your partner. There's patterns that lead you to continuously being, let's say, on the short end of the stick, or rather on a short fuse, or at work, right? You're on a short leash rather at work because you're not accomplishing the things you're supposed to be doing for the company. You say you're going to do this, but you don't do it. You're late on your assignments or whatever the case is. There's patterns that lead to all of this, but then there's patterns that lead to good things as well. think about it, reflect on it, because you can kind of look at your previous few years even and say, you know what? Okay, when I do this pattern, this leads me to having thousands of dollars in the bank. This leads me to having good relationships and good conversations with people, meeting new people. But when I do that, it leads to the opposite. It leads to me being a little bit in debt. When I constantly just spend money and don't pay attention to what's going out, then I end up in a deficit, and that's a bad pattern. Let me break that. But you can break it because you've looked at it, you've acknowledged it, and now you know because you've recognized the pattern, right? So take a moment to honor what you've achieved this year and be honest about what you've learned along the way. Because again, there's lessons to be learned, but only when you take a moment to pause and reflect, then you can see the patterns, then you can recognize and highlight the wins and acknowledge some of those struggles.
What if shopping could earn you cash instead of just costing you? You've been stuck in the cycle, tap, swipe, spend, watching your paycheck just disappear. But one day, after you stumbled onto this app called Rakuten, you ask yourself, why am I paying full price when I don't have to? But then you think, maybe it's just another gift. Then one of your friends tell you about this app called Rakuten, who makes them money and gives them cash back and rewards for thousands of stores every time they make a purchase that they were made anyway. You try it once, you discover hidden deals, compare prices, and you start winning. Shopping becomes a strategy. Every tap pays you back, and you still get what you want. You share Rakuten with your friends, watch your income grow, and become more financially confident. Download the Rakuten app today and keep more of your hard-earned money in your pocket.
As you're reflecting, you can think about some of the things that no longer serve you. Maybe they served you a few years ago. Maybe they even served you in 2025 at some point. But there's baggage. I'll put it this way. There is baggage that we are carrying. And these bags aren't light. And there's not just one bag. There might be multiple bags. Or there could be one heavy bag. But there's multiple bags typically. And we're just trying to go through life carrying all of these bags on our back, around our shoulders, and so on. We're going to get some shoulder pain. We're going to get some knee pain, some back pain, because we're constantly trying to move through life, dragging all of this baggage. And we're not meant to carry the baggage. It's making us move slower. We're not going to be able to walk as far. We're not going to be able to move decisively and quickly. As an entrepreneur, you got to be able to do that. Because we're carrying all of this baggage, it slows us down, it limits our beliefs, and it limits our goals, our vision. Therefore, we set goals based off of what we can see and how far we think we can go, but we're moving slower. And we're not really able to see as far because we're not able to walk as far because of all this baggage that we're holding. So release what no longer serves you. When you take that moment to pause, think back on, yes, those wins. Yes, acknowledge those struggles. Yes, recognize those patterns, but at the same time, recognize what no longer serves you and do yourself a favor and let it go. There's people, there's places, there's things, there's habits, there's patterns that no longer serve us. We have to release them. We have to let them go. Because as we prepare for a new year, we need to release the fear, right? Again, those habits and the self-doubt that have weighed us down. That's like, just drop the bag, leave them where they are. They have no right to move into 2026 with us. They have no right to move into the new year with us. So let's drop them, leave them where they are. And as we do that, as we drop the baggage, we can now see further ahead. We can move faster. We can move more decisively. We can now have a new perspective on the new year and how far we can go, reimagine our goals, and reimagine where we see ourselves in 2026 or by the end of 2026. We can see new possibilities and we can align our intentions with our vision, right? When you have limiting beliefs, and I speak on this a lot because I've had limiting beliefs, and to this point, I still do sometimes, of course, and they have no right to live in my mind. They might come up, but it is my job to again evolve and get rid of those limiting beliefs, kind of just like meditating. Let's say, watch the thought flow by, but don't give it any power or attention. Limiting belief does us no good. I don't think I'm this, or I'm not that, or whatever the case is. Forget all of that. People have done more with less. People have done more than you're aiming to do or acquire with less, or in more of a struggling situation. Not to make light of our situations. There's some tribulation, there's some trials, there's some struggles, There's some turbulence on the flight. Yes, I'm not trying to make light of the situation. However, people have done more with less. So what makes us think that we're not capable? Get rid of the limiting belief. It is possible. We can do it. You can do it. And it's just a matter of, again, letting go of that baggage, taking that moment to pause, and then we can reimagine what the future holds for us, what our goals are, what our vision is, and how far we see ourselves going. So give yourself permission to reimagine what's possible, to see the new year as a blank canvas. Again, that cliche saying, fine, as a blank canvas, but every time you put a dot, a speck of paint on this blank canvas, that came from you. And what you're doing there is you're designing your next level because you let go of the baggage, right? You took the moment to pause and take the wins, to acknowledge the struggles, to acknowledge the patterns. And on this blank canvas now, you were able to put what you want in the right places and create a beautiful masterpiece because you've acknowledged, because you've seen what's going on. You reimagine what your future holds and what it looks like. But only once you do those two steps, those first two, can you then reimagine. Because if you try to skip to step 3 and reimagine what your future holds, what 2026 looks like, you're bringing all that baggage with you into the new year. Whatever came from 2025, the struggles, the negative things, let's say, they need to stay where they are. Take the lesson, take the win, take the fact that you overcame those things and bring that new version of you who was ready for the war into 2026. But other than that, the negativity, leave it where it is. Move forward with a faster pace, feeling lighter because all that baggage has been put down. It has been thrown off your back. You won't have those back pains and shoulder pains, and you can now move forward with clarity, with confidence, with purpose. All right. So lastly, I want you to ask yourself, what am I ready to release? And what new story am I ready to write in the year ahead? All right. If you're looking to be surrounded by like-minded people, to start your 2026 the right way with clarity, support, community, and visionary entrepreneurs to help you to see the patterns and recognize the good things, the good habits, or just add more habits and clarity into your life, click the link in the description to join the Freedom Hub. I know you got something from this episode. Share it out with somebody who you know can benefit from it. Kadeem here, and I look forward to seeing you win and succeed in 2026. See you then.